Hi guys, tonight we drift back more than 1,000 years to a world before GPS or even reliable maps. You stand on a gray northern shore, breath steaming in the chill air, listening to the endless whisper of the North Atlantic. Somewhere in the distance, waves crash against stone, and the scent of salt and tar mingles with wood smoke from a nearby hall. You can almost hear the creak of a long ship being pushed toward the tide. It's dark, cold, and damp. And yet the people who lived here understood this asterisk sea better than most of us ever will. They didn't just sail it. They listened to it, read it, even smelled it. And you probably wouldn't survive a single crossing in their world. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are now. Dim the lights. You trudge closer to the waterline, boots sinking into the thick sand, and feel that strange pulse of asterisk energy that Viking sailors once called half-at-the-sea sense. It wasn't superstition, at least not entirely. It was a battle-learned instinct sharpened through repetition, hunger, and survival. Each ripple on the surface, each sigh of wind through rigging, carried a language, a message if you knew how to hear it. Imagine being one of them. No compass, no charts, no weather forecast, just a wooden hull, a canvas sail, and a horizon that could swallow you whole. Yet somehow these seafarers reached Iceland, Greenland, even the coast of North America centuries before Columbus dreamed of a compass rose. Historians still argue whether Leif Erikson truly landed at Lono Meadows by design or by accident. But either way, the navigation that got him there remains astounding. The mainstream fact is simple. The Vikings were expert sailors who could cross open seas with accuracy far beyond what should have been possible for their time. But the quirky truth is that they did it by blending observation with a strange, almost spiritual intimacy with asterisk nature. They didn't separate science from story. The sea was alive, a living mind that could be read through signs. A ring around the moon meant storms. The sound of distant breakers could signal unseen land. You walk along the edge of the surf, waves licking at your ankles. Every splash feels like a heartbeat, ancient and rhythmic. The water is freezing, but there's something hypnotic in its movement. Picture yourself aboard a long ship, now the Nea, a stout cargo vessel made for endurance. You sway with asterisk the tide, hearing the crew murmuring in Old Norse, rough syllables blending with gull cries. Somewhere a helmsman presses his hand to the rudder's tiller, feeling the ship's vibration like a pulse through the timber. That's how they sense direction, through touch, through resonance. As night deepens, the stars appear one by one. No sex, no telescope, just naked eyes trained by generations of storytelling. They'd passed down constellations through saragas and songs. The North Star wasn't an asterisk coordinate. It was a companion. When you see it glinting steady above the mast, you understand how its loyalty could comfort them. Some said it was the eye of Odin, watching their voyages. Others, more pragmatic, used it to find true north. But long before the stars guided them, sound did. You listen now beyond the slap of water against hull, beyond the creak of oars. The Vikings could identify distance to shore by the echo of waves bouncing off cliffs. A trick rediscovered by modern acoustic science. In dense fog. They'd strike the water with oars or sing low notes to test how sound traveled. Different tones came back with different textures. Sharp if rocks were near, dull if open sea. It's strange, isn't it? Modern sonar works on the same principle, though no one sings to the sea anymore. You glance toward the horizon. It's hard to tell where the sky ends and water begins. That's exactly what they faced. Every voyage, every storm, yet instead of panic, there was rhythm. Each man aboard had a role asterisk in reading that horizon. The Osman felt the drag change when currents shifted. The steersman noted how the clouds moved. The cook smelled the air for hints of rain or fish. They didn't think of these as separate senses. It was one great shared perception of place. At times that sense bordered on eerie. There are accounts, half folklore, half memory of sailors, claiming to feel the nearness of land in their bones. Some swore their teeth tingled when freshwater rivers flowed nearby. Historians debate whether that's myth or asterisk, an early recognition of subtle salinity changes detectable through taste and skin. Even modern scientists admit the human body can perceive slight chemical differences in air and moisture, though we've largely lost the ability to notice. A cold gust brushes your face, bringing the smell of kelp and driftwood. You realize that in this world every detail mattered. The Vikings didn't fight the sea. They negotiated with it. They built ships that could flex with waves rather than resist them. Asterisk, using overlapping planks riveted with iron nails. The sound of those nails under stress told the captain how much strain the hull could take. That's not poetry. It's practical engineering cloaked in experience. You close your eyes for a moment, feeling the wind push and pull. The sea doesn't roar tonight. It hums steady and low. It's the same hum those sailors once fell asleep to, trusting it to cradle them through the dark. You start to sense why they treated it almost like a god, not one to asterisk worship and fear, but to respect as an unpredictable friend. The boundary between reality and imagination softens. In that soft blur, you glimpse how knowledge once felt, embodied, not written. A sailor didn't know the route to Iceland. He was the route. His muscle memory tracing invisible lines across waves and stars. Maybe that's what we've forgotten. Not just the facts, but the feeling of belonging to something vast and alive. You stand still, the tide creeping higher. The horizon glows asterisk faintly with moonlight, silvering every ripple. Somewhere behind you, a horn sounds the call of departure. You're ready now. You've listened to the whispers of salt and night. The voyage begins. You're standing on the deck now, the wooden boards damp beneath your boots, the air vibrating with quiet expectation. The sea stretches out like a dark mirror, and you realize that everything depends on listening. Not just hearing, but truly listening. Viking sailors were masters of this skill long before the age of instruments, asterisks, or compasses. They called it sea ear, an instinct that came from years of exposure, patience, and the kind of silence that presses against you when there's nothing but water in every direction. The first thing you notice is the absence of sound. When the sea goes quiet, it isn't peace, it's warning. Every old sailor knew that. A sudden stillness often meant fog was rolling in, or that a storm was building somewhere beyond sight. You can almost feel that pressure, now like the air itself is holding its breath. The asterisk Vikings didn't panic when silence came. They leaned into it, tilted their heads, and waited. They could tell the shape of land by how waves echoed against it. A sharp slap meant cliffs, a hollow thud meant sand, a whisper meant marshes. They learned to test the air with sound, sometimes humming, sometimes tapping the hull with a wooden peg. The echo that came back was their map. Historians still argue whether this was a deliberate form of proto-sonar or simply an instinct developed over time. Either asterisk way it worked. There are records from Icelandic sagas describing sailors finding fjorded entrances in total fog simply by listening to how waves rebounded. You crouch near the side of the ship, letting your fingers trail in the water. It's colder than you expected, biting like metal. The sound of it is layered, lapping waves, distant gulls, the low groan of the hull. Each layer carries information. A Viking could tell if icebergs were near by the way waves broke. He could tell if a river mouth was close by the dullness of asterisk the swell. It's strange how much of that we've forgotten. Now we stare at digital screens instead of the horizon, waiting for algorithms to warn us what our ancestors could sense naturally. There's a moment when the fog begins to move in. It's not white. It's gray and heavy, like a living thing. The ship grows smaller inside it, muffled by mist. The helmsman leans closer to the water, one hand steady on the rudder, the other cuped to his ear. You can almost hear what he's hearing. The distant roll of asterisk breakers. The rhythm of waves striking stones somewhere far ahead. He listens for gulls, too. Seabirds never stray too far from land. If their cries fade, it means open sea. If they grow louder, it means safety is near. The mainstream historical fact here is that Viking navigators used auditory cues as part of their toolkit, especially in coastal sailing. They could tell direction by the way waves angled against the hull, even in darkness. The quirky detail is that some accounts mention sailors' asterisk singing into the fog, long drawn-out notes meant to test how sound traveled. Each voice carried a specific tone, and experienced ears could tell whether the note came back stretched or compressed, signaling distance to obstacles. Historians still debate if this was purely practical, or if it carried ritual significance, part chant, part navigation. As you listen, you start to notice that the sea itself has a voice. It mutters and sighs, sometimes grumbles. The Vikings believed these sounds carried messages from the gods, or at asterisk least from the sea spirits who guarded certain waters. To ignore those voices was foolish. There were even rituals before long voyages when the crew would gather in silence, listening for omens in the surf. A sudden splash could mean good fortune. A gull cry at midnight could mean death. The fog thickens. You can't see more than a few feet ahead. Someone hums a deep, steady tone. The sound rolls over the deck and fades into the mist. A moment later, a faint echo returns, stretched and hollow. The asterisk helmsman nods. That echo tells him what direction to turn. You realize you're watching a kind of conversation between man and ocean, one we've forgotten how to join. You move toward the prow where the carved dragon head peers into the haze. The wood feels slick beneath your hand, worn smooth by salt. You can hear the creak of the mast and the slap of loose ropes against the sail. Every sound is a heartbeat of the ship. Viking sailors claimed they could tell when the vessel was healthy or when it was close asterisk to breaking just by the tone of its groan. Modern shipwrights confirm this timbre resonates differently when stressed or cracked. The human ear trained long enough can hear the difference. A gust of wind cuts through, snapping the sail taut. The fog shivers and breaks apart, revealing a dim horizon painted in cold blue. You can smell the promise of land before you see it. The faint earthy tongue that means soil instead of salt. The crew murmurs in approval. They never doubted their course. They trusted what they heard. Asterisk, you lean back, listening to the quiet fade into wind again. It's peaceful, but also humbling. Somewhere deep inside, you realize how much modern noise has cost us. We drown out silence with engines, music, chatter. The Vikings did the opposite. They carved meaning out of quiet. The ship glides forward now, oars dipping in rhythm. You can almost fall asleep to the sound of it. The wooden blades slide through the water, each stroke a whisper, each splash a story. Somewhere a sailor hums under his breath asterisk, a low tune meant to match the sea's pulse. It isn't a song to pass time. It's communication. You can feel it in your bones. That deep connection between human rhythm and ocean rhythm. The horizon brightens slightly and the fog begins to dissolve. The crew relaxes, some wiping the mist from their brows, others laughing softly. You realize you've crossed something invisible. A line between fear and familiarity, between chaos and comprehension. The Vikings didn't conquer the sea. They asterisk learned to listen until it let them pass. You close your eyes, letting the last notes of that sea song fade. The water hushes around you. The ship steady and sure beneath your feet. For a moment, you almost believe you could navigate by sound, too, if you only learned to listen long enough. You lean over the ship's side, fingertips grazing the cold surface of the sea. The water rolls like liquid glass, dark and heavy beneath a pale sky. Every ripple carries meaning. Every swirl tells a quiet story. To Viking sailors, the ocean was asterisk, not chaos, but a conversation. They read it like language, one that spoke in textures and movements instead of words. As you trail your hand, you feel how the current changes direction almost imperceptibly. To you, it is just a chill between your fingers. To a Viking, it was a clue. They understood the sea's dialects, the difference between the pulse of deep ocean and the slow drag of a near-shore tide. Long before written charts existed, these seafarers learned to read currents through their senses. Asterisk, modern oceanographers confirm that subtle shifts in temperature, foam, and flow could indeed reveal location. Though we've lost that intimacy, records from Icelandic sagas hint at sailors who could identify when they were nearing the Faroes, just by feeling the resistance of water against the oar. They believed the sea there tightened its grip, as if the land pulled at it from below. It sounds like poetry, yet hydrodynamic studies today show that undersea topography does influence surface tension and wave pattern. The asterisk old mariners didn't know the science. They didn't need to. Their skin told them the truth first. One peculiar fragment of law says that a sailor could tell direction by dragging a hand behind the stern and studying the trails of foam. Smooth bubbles meant tailwind. Jagged trails meant cross-current. Whether that was truly reliable or not, no one can be certain. Maritime archaeologists still discuss whether such descriptions were literal or symbolic, a kind of sensory shorthand passed down through asterisk stories. But there's beauty in the image of men trusting their fingers as much as their eyes. You look down again and see how the light dances over the waves, turning them from slate to silver in an instant. The Vikings noticed this too. They used the play of color on water to gauge depth. Shallow waters glimmered with turquoise when sunlight hit the sand below. Deeper channels dulled to gray-green, while regions rich with plankton glowed faintly in twilight. Even now, sailors call this the color of depth, a practice the Norse asterisk perfected centuries before sonar. Imagine sailing at dawn, surrounded by fog so thick you could barely see your own hand. A faint glow in the water ahead might reveal an approaching current, or the shimmer of ice beneath the surface. They watched how foam clustered along a current's edge, how seabirds drifted along invisible lines of motion. These signs formed a living map. You begin to understand that navigation was never just about stars. It was about texture, smell, temperature, and intuition combined. Asterisk, it's fascinating to realize how much of this wisdom was embodied. It didn't keep written manuals, no neat lists of how to read the sea. Instead, the knowledge lived in muscle and instinct, passed from father to son, from sailor to apprentice. When one old navigator died, part of the ocean's memory went with him. Some historians think that's why Norse oral culture treated seafaring songs with such reverence they weren't entertainment. They were preservation. You close your eyes and picture a ship asterisk lost in fog, surrounded by gray silence. The crew sits still, waiting. The helmsman feels the current tug at the rudder. He senses it not through logic, but through familiarity. It's a strange partnership, man and water. Modern psychology might call it pattern recognition. The Vikings might have called it respect. There's a story about a helmsman named Anna who claimed he could find Iceland, even when clouds hid both sun and stars. He would drop bits of wood into the sea and watch how they asterisk turned. If the wood spun clockwise, he said, the current pulled toward home. If it drifted straight, he was still far out. Whether that worked or not, no one can prove. Some researchers suggest he was observing surface drift caused by the Gulf Stream centuries before anyone mapped it. You feel the rhythm of the waves now, a steady push and pull beneath your feet. Each motion has its own personality. Some are gentle and rounded, shaped by open water. Others are short, choppy, born of nearby land. Asterisk, the Vikings gave them names, soft ones, harsh ones, all with character. They knew that a sudden change in rhythm meant a shift in geography. Somewhere below, something new was rising from the depths. Your attention drifts to the horizon again. The sea looks endless, but the Vikings knew better. They saw borders where we see nothing. The faintest rippled line could mark the edge of one current and the beginning of another. That boundary meant transition, perhaps from safety to danger, or from familiar to unknown. Modern scientists asterisk marvel at how accurately Norse sailors tracked these zones, though they lacked any tools for measurement. Satellite imaging later revealed patterns that mirror ancient roots, proving that these people understood more than they were ever given credit for. Their navigation wasn't superstition. It was observation refined over centuries. As the wind rises, you feel droplets of spray touch your face. Cold, sharp awakening. For a moment, you understand what it means to trust the sea's language. To modern asterisk ears, it might sound romantic, but to them, it was survival. Misreading the water could mean death. Reading it well could mean landfall. You step back from the edge, letting the rhythm of the ship carry you. The water still murmurs below, whispering secrets only the patient can hear. Somewhere deep inside, you realize that knowledge isn't always written in books. Sometimes it flows, drifts, and ripples alive, waiting for anyone quiet enough to listen. Night folds itself around the long ship like an asterisk soft cloak. The sea breathes slow and steady beneath you, while the sky opens wide with cold fire. Up there, the stars seem impossibly sharp, so clear they almost hum. This is the world's oldest navigation chart, written not in ink, but in light. You tilt your head back, and the heavens swirl with stories. The Vikings knew them all. Long before telescopes, before compasses, they sailed by these flickering points. Yet they didn't see them the way we do. You and I look for constellations, tidy asterisk shapes made up by long dead-end astronomers. They saw families, rivalries, warnings. The stars were alive, always shifting, their relationships as meaningful as their brightness to steer by them. You didn't memorize patterns. You memorized the spaces between them. Evidence from medieval Norse texts hints that navigators treated the night sky as a kind of musical score. Each star had rhythm, a position within a greater harmony. Modern astrophysicists have noted that the Viking sky maps seem to asterisk focus on angles rather than fixed lines, using distances between stars to maintain direction. It's like hearing a song and knowing when a note is slightly off-key. You might not measure it, but you feel it. A curious detail from a 13th century Icelandic manuscript describes something few people notice today. Sailors would stare at the stars until their vision blurred, and then move their eyes slightly to the side. In that soft gaze, they saw dimmer stars invisible to direct sight. They didn't asterisk understand why it worked, but modern physiology explains it. Human eyes detect faint light better off-center. Somehow, the Vikings had already discovered that through experience. You look up now, trying it yourself. The sky deepens into endless blue-black. If you focus too hard, the stars vanish. If you relax, they bloom again. You understand what they knew. Navigation isn't just about looking. It's about seeing. The North Star, steady and bright, served as anchor. It marked north, constant through seasons. But asterisk, even that wasn't simple. Vikings called it Ledisjana, the guiding star, and believed it linked the human world to the halls of the gods. Its position above the horizon could reveal your latitude, though they had no instruments to measure it. Some scholars suggest they used their fists stacked edge to edge to estimate degrees, a surprisingly accurate trick rediscovered by modern survivalists. Still, the sky wasn't always clear. Fog, clouds, or endless summer daylight in northern latitudes often hid the stars. Asterisk, what then? They watched the space between. The faint glimmer of dusk on one horizon or the stretch of dawn on another told them the sun's hidden position. They even noted how the color of twilight lingered longer in one direction. From that, they could guess orientation. It's astonishing how little light they needed to find their way. You can almost hear their quiet discussions, low voices naming constellations like friends. The bear, the swan, the wain. Each one held not just direction but asterisk moral meaning. The bear guarded travelers. The swan warned of storms. The wain, our Big Dipper, pointed the path home. Their mythology and geography were intertwined. To navigate was also to remember the stories that shaped the stars themselves. One ancient fragment mentions a shifting star that some believed foretold rough seas. It might have been a planet mistaken for a wandering light. The crew would argue softly about what it meant. Some said it was Thor's torch. Others said it was the eye of a drowned man. Asterisk, whether superstition or signal, those lights stirred imagination and caution alike. Modern researchers note that such myths often encoded practical knowledge. When certain planets rose at specific seasons, the winds also changed. You imagine being on that dark deck, breath steaming, eyes lifted to infinity. No compass rose, no error margin, only trust in patterns, in memory and the unbroken line between ship and sky. Even today, the simplicity feels sacred. We've traded awe for precision. They had both wrapped asterisk together. The rhythm of O's slows as the night deepens. Somewhere a man hums an old verse about the whale road, the sea stretching to the end of the world. The stars shimmer like frost. You realize that each sailor carried his own internal map, made not of ink, but of light and muscle memory. Navigation was almost a meditation, a balance between awareness and surrender. A fragment from a later chronicle tells of a helmsman who claimed he could sense when clouds covered a star by the change in his asterisk heartbeat. Scientists might scoff, but even now pilots speak of spatial disorientation when deprived of stars. The body knows more than we give it credit for. The Vikings trusted that knowledge completely. Now the sky turns faintly silver at the edges. Dawn approaches, erasing constellations one by one. You feel a pang of loss as they fade, as if friends are slipping quietly below the horizon. But the sailors don't mourn. They turn to a new light, another tool waiting to guide them. The stars asterisk rest, but the sea never sleeps. The dawn creeps up softly, pale gold brushing the edge of the sea. The stars retreat one by one, and the air fills with that strange quiet before the world decides to wake. You stand near the prow, watching sunlight break through a drifting veil of mist. The crew stirs, adjusting ropes, murmuring in the low rhythm of routine, but one man remains still, holding a small crystal to the sky. It catches the light and glows faintly. You realize you're seeing something that borders between myth and asterisk science. That crystal is what later ages called a sunstone. Not a gem of legend, but a real piece of calcite or cordierite that Viking sailors may have used to locate the hidden sun on cloudy days. The idea sounds fantastical, almost too clever to be ancient. Yet fragments of Icelandic sagas describe it plainly. One verse tells of King Olaf's navigator who held up a stone to find the sun's direction when fog had swallowed the sky. For centuries, historians dismissed it as poetic invention. Then, asterisk monologists tested the concept, and the results astonished them. It turns out that certain crystals can polarize light, splitting it into distinct rays. When rotated, one ray brightens and one darkens, revealing the orientation of the sun, even when invisible. Modern experiments in Iceland and Denmark prove the method works with remarkable accuracy, within a few degrees of true solar position. So what once sounded like magic was, in fact, early optics. The Vikings may have discovered it by chance or through patient observation of asterisk nature's quirks. One curious note from a 10th century text mentions that sailors sometimes kept two such stones of different colors, perhaps to test which gave the clearer reading. Whether that practice was real or imagined, it reveals how methodical these mariners were. They didn't rely on luck alone. They experimented, compared, and refined. A handful of navigators may have been what we'd now call scientists, though they wouldn't have used that word. Still, not everyone agrees on how *widespread the practice was. Some researchers think the sunstone was more symbolic than practical, a charm representing clarity of sight. Others argue it was essential equipment, particularly in northern latitudes where twilight could last all night. The debate continues, swaying between evidence and imagination. But you can picture it easily, a helmsman lifting a glowing shard toward a gray sky. Watching the faint flash of light that points the way, you try to imagine the feeling of that moment. The world around you is featureless, the horizon blurred into mist. Yet in your palm a small crystal burns with secret knowledge. You rotate it slowly, watching the brightness shift. Somewhere inside that play of light lies the direction of east. It is both simple and profound. This connection between perception and survival runs deep in Norse seafaring. They paid attention to phenomena modern people rarely notice. How light changes on the water's surface. How brightness bends across clouds. How reflections drift in the wet planks of the ship. These patterns became their compass. They read polarization, glare, and the subtle shimmer of morning haze, as if they were letters in a vast alphabet of sky and sea. The crew begins to hoist the sail. Sunlight spreads through the mist, turning it to molten silver. The long ship's carved dragon head gleams, droplets sliding from its jaws. You hear laughter now, the kind that comes from relief. The storm has passed. The way is clear. Someone pockets the sunstone, wrapping it carefully in cloth, and you realize it is not treated like treasure, but like a tool, useful, humble, quietly miraculous. Archaeologists once doubted that Vikings could have mastered such subtle methods of navigation. Then a fragment of calcite was found in a British shipwreck from centuries later, hinting that the technique might have endured long after the Viking Age. Some experts even suggest that this lost art influenced later mariners without anyone realizing its origin. That thought lingers. How many modern inventions were rediscoveries of forgotten wisdom. You step closer to the edge, letting the brightening wind brush your face. The world feels sharper now, colors clearer after the gray. The sea reflects the sun in shards of gold, and for a moment you see how a sailor might think of the water as liquid light. That's what the sunstone captured. A fragment of that brilliance held steady in one's hand. Another voice within you wonders what it must have felt like to trust such fragile tools. One cloudy morning could mean life or death, and yet they faced it calmly. The crystal might fail. The clouds might thicken, but they believed that persistence revealed direction eventually. There's a quiet lesson there, one that transcends centuries. Sometimes when clarity hides, patience is the true compass. You glance back toward the crew. Their movements are unhurried, confident. They don't rush the sea. They move with it. Every sound, the creak of ropes. The flap of the sail seems to echo that balance between control and surrender. The sun climbs higher now, breaking the last threads of mist. The horizon opens wide, dazzling and clean. The voyage continues, guided by a flicker of light caught in a crystal, and by instincts older than memory. The sun climbs higher, and the long ship begins to move with a steady pulse. The sail fills with wind, its woven wool catching invisible power. The ropes tighten, the mast groans softly, and the ship comes alive. You can almost feel the heartbeat of the vessel beneath your feet. The Vikings understood this dance better than anyone. To them, the wind was both an adversary and an ally, a living force that could carry or crush. They learned to tame it through sound and touch, not through numbers. You close your eyes for a moment and listen. The canvas thrums deep and rhythmic. The ropes whistle. Somewhere a sailor adjusts a knot with deliberate calm. This is not guesswork. It is conversation. The long ship answers to every adjustment, and the crew listens like musicians fine-tuning an instrument. Archaeological reconstructions of Viking ships reveal how carefully these vessels were designed for the northern seas. The square sail, simple in appearance, was a masterpiece of flexibility. Its angle could be altered slightly to catch or spill air, giving the crew control in unpredictable gusts. Modern wind tunnel tests confirm that these sails could perform surprisingly well, even when sailing across the wind, not just with it. It's remarkable how engineering and intuition worked hand in hand, long before aerodynamics had a name. One rarely discussed fact about Viking rigging is that the sailcloth itself carried layers of meaning. They soaked it in animal fat, fish oil, or even milk to make it resistant to water and wind. Each crew had its own recipe, passed down like a family secret. The mixture not only waterproofed the sail, but also changed its color, sometimes giving it a reddish hue under sunlight. That shimmer could serve as a signal to distant allies or a warning to rivals. You watch as the wind shifts slightly, and the helmsman adjusts course without a word. His hand rests lightly on the tiller, yet every small movement counts. The balance between sail, rudder, and sea is delicate. Modern sailors use instruments to detect such changes. The Vikings relied entirely on their bodies. They could feel a change in the wind direction through the texture of air on their cheeks. That may sound exaggerated, but studies on long-distance rowers and traditional sailors show how heightened awareness develops after years at sea. The Vikings simply embodied it. There's a story from an old Greenlandic chronicle about a sailor who could predict wind by the way the smoke from his pipe bent. He would blow a ring, watch it twist, and declare what kind of day awaited them. People laughed at his superstition until his predictions proved true time after time. Modern meteorology would explain it as reading microcurrents and humidity, but to his shipmates it was magic. The line between skill and sorcery was always blurred on the open ocean. The wind stiffens now, and the ship begins to lean slightly. The crew responds instinctively. Some tighten ropes. Others shift weight. They don't speak. Every gesture is practiced. Every movement part of a shared rhythm. It's as if the entire vessel is one body breathing in harmony with the sea. You can see why later poets described long ships as living creatures. Their prows lifted like heads, their sails became lungs. The Vikings treated them with the respect due to a companion. A curious asterisk tradition mentioned in several sagas describes how some captains spoke to their ships as if to calm them before a storm. The words were gentle, almost like lulis. Modern historians interpret this as ritualized psychology, a way to steady nerves. But sailors swore it worked. A calm ship, they said, survived better than a fearful one. The wind shifts again, colder now, carrying the faint smell of distant rain. The helmsman looks at the clouds, studying their shape. He doesn't see mere weather, he sees intention. Thick gray asterisk lines rising from the horizon mean heavy gusts. Thin streaks across a pale sky mean steady breezes. Every Viking child grew up learning those signs. When they spoke of the wind gods, they were naming patterns of air they understood intimately. You look up at the sail again. It strains, flutters, then settles. The ropes creak with satisfaction. This is the Viking sailor's true art, knowing when to fight and when to yield. A novice might tighten every line, but a veteran loosens some, letting the ship breathe. Asterisk, even the strongest wind becomes manageable if the sail knows how to dance with it. There's a kind of poetry in that partnership. We often think of control as domination, but here it means listening. When the sea and wind argue, the ship becomes mediator. You standing here can almost sense that conversation. 1,000 invisible threads tugging, twisting, balancing. You hear the sigh of wind in the rigging and realize that this sound guided entire civilizations across unknown oceans. As the gust asterisk fades, calm returns. The sail flutters softly, catching stray rays of sun. You can smell the oily wool, the salt drying on its surface, the faint musk of tar. These scents once meant safety. They meant movement, direction, hope. The Vikings might not have had compasses, but they had confidence or trust born of deep intimacy with their craft and the world it sailed through. The horizon gleams ahead, endless and inviting. The ship glides onward, the wind whispering its approval. You feel the same quiet asterisk certainty that must have filled those long voyages. Not arrogance, but faith in motion itself. The wind may change, the sea may rise, but those who listen will always find their way. The ship glides steadily now, its hull humming softly as it rides the rolling swells. You rest your hand against the railing and feel a faint vibration beneath your palm, a low thrum like the purring of some great animal. The Vikings often said that a good ship was alive, that the wood itself had a spirit. Looking around, you begin to understand why asterisk everything here breathes. The ropes shift, the planks creak, the mast sighs. Nothing is still. Each long ship had a name, not for vanity, but for identity. The islanding air, the sea stallion, the wave serpent. These weren't poetic titles. They were ways of acknowledging a bond. Before every voyage, the crew would offer a small gesture of respect to their vessel. Sometimes a drop of ale poured across the bow, sometimes a whispered blessing. To them, the ship wasn't a tool. It was a companion with asterisk moods and memory. Archaeologists studying ship remains from Roskilde and Osberg have noticed something remarkable. The timbers were cut so that the natural curve of the tree followed the curve of the hull. This made the wood stronger, more flexible. It also meant that each plank carried the grain's original energy, bending like muscle, instead of resisting pressure. You run your fingers along the rail and can almost sense that tension. The tree's life reshaped into a creature that swims instead of stands. One asterisk curious note from a 12th century Icelandic saga mentions sailors claiming they could tell if a ship dreamed of land. They said it would hum differently, the sound of its timbers changing tone as it neared shore. Modern researchers can't quite explain this, though some suggest it might have been the resonance of shallow waves reflecting under the hull. The physics make sense, even if the poetry surpasses it. You close your eyes and listen. The ship's voice is low but constant, a mix of groan and rhythm. Each wave makes its asterisk speak a little differently. The Vikings knew these voices like family. A sudden new creak could mean danger, a weakened joint, or too much strain. Shipwrights taught their sons to identify such changes by ear, a practice some modern boat builders still use today. They didn't just build ships, they tuned them. At times, the relationship between sailor and ship bordered on devotion. There's an account from a Greenland expedition describing how a crew refused to abandon their sinking vessel. The asterisk believed that if they deserted her, their souls would wander forever. Eventually, they lashed themselves to the deck and waited for rescue that never came. Romanticized or not, it reveals the depth of emotion invested in these wooden bodies. The wind shifts again, filling the sail with a deep whoosh. You feel the sudden lift as the ship surges forward and your heartbeat matches its pace. The helmsman smiles slightly, his eyes on the horizon, his hand firm on the tiller. He doesn't shout orders. He doesn't need to. Every asterisk man on board feels what the ship feels. There's no separation between human and vessel. That unity is what kept them alive through storms that would break lesser crews. One lesser known practice involved listening to the hull through the floorboards. A sailor would press his ear to the deck to judge whether the ship's speed was too high or if currents had changed direction. Modern sailors use instruments for that now, but the principle remains sound literally. Under certain conditions, water flow produces asterisk different tones as it rushes along the keel. Experienced ears could tell whether they were gliding over deep ocean or skimming dangerously near shores. You breathe in the scent of wet pine and tar. It's earthy, comforting. This was the smell of home and survival for the Norse. Shipbuilders spent months preparing wood, coating it with tar made from burning pine roots. A process so potent the aroma could last for decades. That fragrance meant safety. It meant the hull was sealed tight against the cold sea. Even now, asterisk replicas of Viking ships carry the same smell, as if memory lingers in every molecule of resin. What fascinates you most is how the Vikings blended engineering with emotion. Their ships were both art and armor. Every line of the hull followed logic, but every carving, every curve carried soul. The dragon heads at the prow were not decoration. They were guardians meant to frighten spirits or enemies. Yet when approaching friendly shores, the crew sometimes removed or covered those fierce figures. They believed it was asterisk wrong to bring fear to peaceful land. The waves slap gently against the sides. The sound is steady, hypnotic. You start to think of the ship as a living companion, as they did. You picture it dreaming of safe harbors, humming softly in its sleep. Perhaps that is the secret of their success at sea. Not just craftsmanship or courage, but empathy. They treated the ocean and their vessel as conscious presences to be understood, not conquered. A modern ship is silent, its engines drowning out all other asterisk voices. But here you hear everything. The rush of water under the keel, the sigh of wind in the rigging, the quiet groan of planks expanding with salt. Each sound is information, each vibration a clue. To the Vikings, this was navigation as much as any star or stone. As the day drifts toward evening, the sea flattens into a glassy calm. The ship slows, resting as if satisfied. The crew leans back, eyes half closed, listening to the gentle rhythm below. You realize the voyage isn't only about asterisk distance. It's about harmony, finding the exact point where wood, wind, and will move as one. You reach down, touch the deck again, and feel it pulse faintly beneath your hand. The ship doesn't need words to tell you. It knows where it's going. The sea changes as you move farther from land. The waves stretch wider, smoother, like the surface of a sleeping creature. You feel the ship ride them gently, gliding rather than striking. The air smells different, too, cooler and cleaner, with asterisk a faint sweetness that only deep water carries. For Viking sailors, this was familiar territory. They called these open routes hay-leather sea paths, invisible highways that connected their scattered world. They knew these paths not by name on parchment, but by the feel of the currents. Every voyage began with studying the tides, watching how they pulled at the shoreline. Some of those currents were seasonal, others eternal. The Vikings memorized them with precision that rivals modern ocean charts. Modern oceanographers, mapping asterisk North Atlantic drift patterns, found that many align almost perfectly with the sailing routes described in sagas. What was once legend turns out to be empirical navigation encoded in story. A fascinating record from Greenland describes how mariners predicted currents by watching how kelp drifted. If the seaweed lay flat along the surface, the water was steady. If it twisted or disappeared beneath waves, it meant hidden undercurrents. To test direction, they sometimes tossed bits of wood into the water and watched how the asterisk floated, compared to the ship's heading. You can picture that small ritual quiet, simple, endlessly practical. One detail that rarely makes it into textbooks is how they described the sea's colors to mark different zones of travel. The northern drift near Iceland was steel, blue, cold, and heavy. The southern drift toward Britain was green, gold, smoother, and warmer. Those weren't just poetic expressions. They reflected variations in light, salinity, and temperature. The sailors read these asterisk signs as clearly as we read road signs. Some historians suggest that they memorized sequences of sensory cues rather than abstract distances. A route might go something like this: 2 days of heavy swell, then lighter air, then warmer smell, then a bird cry from the south. It was a symphony of observation, not a list of coordinates. When you think about it, it makes sense. Their world had no maps, so memory became geography. There are old tales of sailors who could sense when they crossed from one current into another asterisk because the ship's rhythm changed. They said the sea began to breathe differently. Scientists now understand why the wavelength and speed of waves vary between warm and cold water, creating distinct motion under the hull. The body, when trained, can detect these differences unconsciously. What might sound mystical was actually deep sensory intelligence. As you stand near the stern, you notice that even here, miles from shore, the air shifts in flavor. There's a hint of iron, perhaps from volcanic dust carried asterisk on the wind. The Vikings would have noted that, too. They read smell and temperature as part of their compass. Warm, dry air hinted at currents from the south. Sharp, icy gusts meant the northern drift was close. Today, we rely on barometers and radar. They relied on their skin. A strange yet beautiful custom persisted among some crews. Before a long voyage, they would throw a small carved figure into the sea and watch how it drifted. If it floated freely in one direction, that was the path they should follow. If it spun or asterisk stayed near the ship, they delayed departure. It sounds superstitious, but the motion of that figure revealed surface flow and current resistance. Faith and physics worked quietly together. As afternoon light softens, the water ahead gleams with silvery streaks. These are rip lines where opposing currents meet. Modern sailors mark them as dangerous turbulent zones. The Vikings called them sea seams. They believed that crossing them demanded respect, silence, a small offering, perhaps a song. They had learned that asterisk when two waters argued. Ships broke if they forced their way through carelessly. What fascinates scholars even now is how accurately they timed their voyages to these flows. Archaeological dating shows that expeditions to Iceland, Greenland, and Vinland often occurred during the same seasonal windows that modern sailors still consider optimal. They must have kept detailed oral calendars of when each current turned favorable. Those calendars vanished with time, but hints survive in saga descriptions of journeys asterisk that always began under the same stars and ended at the same moon. The world around you is still. Only the sound of water slipping along the hull breaks the quiet. You realize that the sea is not uniform at all. It is a vast moving web, a living map in constant motion. The Vikings didn't just cross it. They became part of it. To them, mastery meant harmony. To fight the current was foolish. To follow it was wisdom. As night falls, faint phosphorescence appears in the water. Tiny sparks of green and blue flicker around the ship's asterisk sides. The sailors watch them in silence. They called this sea fire, believing it to be the work of spirits guiding their way. We now know it as bioluminescent plankton reacting to motion. The science is modern, but the wonder is ancient. You lean over the edge, watching the glowing trail fade into the darkness. Somewhere below, the current you follow stretches across half the world, unseen, yet steady. It connects continents, histories, and hearts. Perhaps that's what the Vikings truly understood, that the ocean is not asterisk a barrier, but a thread tying everything together. Morning comes again, pale and clean, with a light wind rippling across the surface of the sea. The air feels softer now, touched by something earthy. You take a deep breath and catch faint traces of pine, tar, and distant smoke. The crew stirs, murmuring with quiet satisfaction. To them, scent is not simply atmosphere. It is information. The Vikings understood that the sea carried smell as surely as it carried sound or light. Before sight or sound could announce asterisk land, the nose often did. The first hint of shore was not always visible cliffs or birds overhead. It was the smell of soil, moss, and wood carried on the wind. Accounts from early Norse voyages mention sailors waking from sleep and declaring that they smelled land hours before anyone could see it. Today we might smile at that, yet science supports them. Coastal breezes truly do carry airborne organic compounds from forests and marshes far out to sea. Researchers studying modern navigators in similar environments have confirmed that under calm weather conditions, humans can detect terrestrial scents across dozens of nautical miles. What the Vikings lacked in instruments, they made up for in training their senses. When you live your life exposed to salt, wood, and fish, any deviation stands out. There is a peculiar entry in a medieval Icelandic text that describes a sailor who identified the shores of Greenland by the taste of the wind. The phrase sounds poetic until you realize he meant it literally. The salt in the air tasted sharper, richer with minerals from glacial dust. It was a taste memory as accurate as any visual cue. In an age before weather charts or barometers, taste and smell became early warning systems. Another odd but charming custom appears in several sagas. Before departure, the helmsman would sniff a handful of seaweed collected near the home harbor. Then later compare its smell to that of the sea during the journey. If the scent grew fresher or warmer, they believed they were sailing towards similar waters. If it turned acrid, they suspected foreign currents. Whether this ritual truly worked or simply gave confidence is hard to know, but the gesture reveals how physical and intuitive Viking navigation was. You close your eyes and try to sense what they sensed. The breeze touches your skin like cool silk. Beneath the tang of salt lies something richer, risen perhaps from distant pine forests or the faint sweetness of peat smoke from unseen settlements. It feels like a whisper of home. No instrument could measure such detail, yet to a Norse crew it was enough to confirm direction. Not all smells promised comfort. The sea could warn of danger, too. Sailors recognized the odor of approaching storms, a metallic scent that came just before lightning. They also feared the stench of seaweed rotting on hidden reefs, which meant shallow waters or ship-breaking rocks ahead. Their vocabulary for scent was richer than ours. Where we would say fishy or brinny, they had dozens of words describing variations of the sea's breath. It is interesting to note that in Norse mythology, smell is often linked to memory and foresight. Odin himself is said to know by scent what happens in distant worlds. Perhaps this belief grew from seafaring life. Smell connects past and present instantly. The scent of home, of tar, of wind, over kelp. You can imagine how sailors returning after months away would close their eyes, inhale deeply, and know where they were before any land appeared. You glance toward the mast, where strips of sailcloth dry in the sun. The odor of tar rises strong, mingled with the sharper tang of fish oil used to seal the ropes. It is both unpleasant and reassuring. The same materials that stink also keep the ship alive. There's a lesson in that balance, too. The line between foulness and survival is thinner than we think. One of the strangest theories about Viking navigation suggests they might have used dogs to confirm proximity to land. Certain sagas mention shipboard animals trained to bark when they caught familiar scents from home shores. No archaeological evidence confirms this fully, but it would fit their pragmatic creativity. A dog's nose could outmatch any human sense, and sailors were never too proud to learn from nature. The wind shifts, and with it comes a new scent, cold, clean, edged with salt crystals. The helmsman squints toward the horizon. He doesn't see anything yet, but the smell tells him the truth. Open ocean ahead, no land in reach. The crew grows quiet again, settling into rhythm. They trust the air. It strikes you that while we chase precision through technology, they trusted imperfection through asterisk attention. They didn't need to be exact. They needed to be aware. In that awareness lies something we've largely forgotten: the body's ability to read the world without translation. You breathe again, slower now, savoring the mix of pine, salt, and distant rain. Each note feels ancient, like a memory too old for words. You wonder how many journeys began with that same breath, and how many ended because a sailor ignored what the wind tried to tell him. The ship glides on, the scent of land asterisk fading again, replaced by the deep neutrality of the open sea. For now the only smell is salt and wood, steady and endless. Somewhere ahead, another coast waits, its invisible perfume already drifting your way. The air is cool and clear as morning deepens. The horizon edged with a faint silver line where sky meets water. A sharp cry breaks the quiet. You look up and see a dark shape cutting across the light. Wings stretched wide, feathers flashing. Then another follows, and another. The Vikings asterisk would have lifted their heads too, recognizing their oldest companions, the seabirds. They learned early that birds were more reliable than compasses. A gull or a puffin does not wander without reason. Each has a pattern, a rhythm that ties it to land and feeding grounds. Watching them could tell a sailor more about distance and direction than any chart. You tilt your face toward the sky, following their arcs, and you begin to see what the Norse navigators saw, a living map written in flight. According asterisk to Icelandic accounts, sailors carried trained ravens on board. When they lost sight of land, they released one into the air. If the birds circled and returned, the sea stretched too far. If it flew straight ahead and did not come back, land lay somewhere in that direction. The method is so practical that historians suspect it was common practice, not legend. In fact, the story of Flaki Vilgerson, the man credited with discovering Iceland, tells how he released 3 ravens to guide his voyage. The first returned quickly, the asterisk second hovered, and came back uncertain, but the third flew northwest and vanished. Flaki followed its path and found the island he sought. What seems like myth now was once a kind of field science. Ornithologists note that ravens, gulls, and orcs each have specific flight ranges from land. Observing the height and angle of their flight could tell a sailor not only where to go, but how far they still were from shore. Those who survived enough voyages learned to tell even species apart by wing beat and call. One asterisk intriguing fragment from a Norse poem describes how sailors read the speech of the puffins. The phrase puzzled scholars for years, until one marine biologist pointed out that puffins cried differently depending on whether they are flying toward feeding grounds or nesting cliffs. To a trained ear, those sounds could indeed serve as direction. Whether the Vikings understood the biology or not, they understood the pattern. You can picture it. A group of sailors standing quietly, eyes narrowed, as a single bird dips low over the sea. The asterisk would watch not just its path, but the way the wind pushed against its wings, the distance it covered before turning. Sometimes they even changed course based on a bird's hesitation. To modern minds that might seem risky, but these men trusted what the sky told them. A peculiar yet practical detail emerges in a few old travel logs. Some captains brought cages of pigeons on board, not as pets, but as messengers. Released one by one, they could signal to ships behind or return to familiar harbors if a fleet scattered. It was an early form of communication, invisible to history until fragments of wooden cages were found preserved in shipwrecks. Watching the birds, you begin to notice their precision. They rise and fall with the wind, never fighting more than they must. Every motion wastes nothing. The Vikings mirrored that behavior. They believed that to travel well, one had to sail like a bird responding, not resisting. The ship beneath you feels suddenly light, almost airborne. A faint academic mystery lingers about whether certain birds were regarded as sacred guides. Some texts suggest that ravens were not only navigators but symbols of Odin himself, messengers between worlds. Others think that belief was metaphor layered onto older habits of observation. Whatever the case, when a bird appeared far out at sea, it was never ignored. It meant direction and perhaps also protection. Imagine the feeling of spotting the first gull after days of fog. The crew would shout, faces bright with relief. That single flick of wings meant the voyage was nearing safety. The smell of land might follow soon after, or the faint brown streak of a distant coastline. Even the sound of those birds, their cries slicing through silence, felt like music after weeks of emptiness. Modern sailors sometimes rediscover this. Bird migration maps still trace the same corridors. Viking ships once followed. The North Atlantic remains alive with wings at certain seasons, though few today look up long enough to notice. The old navigators did not have the luxury to ignore what flew above them. They needed every clue, every flicker of movement. You glance upward again, the gulls now shrinking into tiny dots. The wind whistles softly through the rigging. The helmsman adjusts course slightly, perhaps imitating what his ancestors did 1,000 years ago when birds showed the way. There is a deep humility in that gesture. It acknowledges that wisdom often comes from creatures smaller than ourselves. As the sun rises higher, the birds drift away toward unseen cliffs. The sea grows empty once more, but the image stays with you. The arc of wings, the promise of land somewhere beyond the edge of sight. You realize that navigation is not only about finding a place on a map. It is about listening to the world around you until it speaks. The ship continues forward, guided now by instinct, by rhythm, by the faint memory of flight, still echoing in the sky. Somewhere ahead lies new land, waiting for those who know how to read its signs before they ever see its shore. The day brightens slowly, the sea like polished stone beneath a cloudless sky. You lean over the rail, peering down into water so clear that you can almost see its color shifting from turquoise to steel. The Vikings understood this language of shades. For them, color was not decoration. It was measurement, orientation, even prophecy. Archaeological records from ship routes suggest that Viking sailors often steered by hue, distinguishing safe depth from danger simply by how the water looked. Near the coasts of Norway, the water turned green where sunlight asterisk struck shallow sand. Over deep trenches it darkened to blue-black, signaling caution. That awareness came not from theory, but repetition, centuries of eyes learning to translate light into knowledge. A detail preserved in a 13th century saga mentions that when the sea greened with foam, it meant plankton were near and fish were plentiful. What sounds like a metaphor is actually early ecology. Marine scientists now confirm that plankton blooms change the color of the sea, shifting it toward bright green asterisk in nutrient-rich zones. The Vikings read these patterns with unspoken expertise. One curious fragment from a later chronicle tells of sailors who claimed to see white ghosts moving beneath the hull. They described them as ribbons of brightness that appeared only before storms. At the time, no one could explain them. Modern science calls it bioluminescence, microorganisms glowing in disturbed water when oxygen levels change. The sailors could not name the cause, but they knew what it meant. Rough weather asterisk on the way. You lean farther over and catch a flicker of silver as a shawl passes below. The Vikings would have noticed that, too. They called such flashes sea mirrors, believing that the ocean revealed its health through its brightness. Dull water meant stillness or death. Shining water meant motion and life. To them, light itself was a living presence. It is recorded that some navigators carried polished bronze bowls to collect sea air during their voyages. They watched the color change as the liquid settled. When it turned cloudy, asterisk, they knew they were near river mouths or melting ice. When it remained clear and blue, they were deep in the open ocean. These small observations built a vocabulary of color more precise than any modern map. Scholars continue to puzzle over how far this perception went. Some argue that the Vikings developed their own kind of chromatic compass, associating subtle shades with direction. The idea remains speculative, but patterns in old sailing songs hint at it. Certain verses describe eastward blue and westward green, suggesting asterisk consistent associations between color and cardinal orientation. Whether this was coincidence or method is still an open question. As you gaze into the rippling depths, the water shifts again. Now it glows faintly with reflected light from the sky, a surface alive with motion. The Vikings saw in that shimmer something divine. They spoke of Agaria, the sea god, stirring his golden cauldron to mix currents and tides. The foam was his brew, the color his mood. Belief and observation blended seamlessly. Faith sharpened focus rather asterisk than replacing it. Modern sailors sometimes rediscover this instinct without realizing it. They talk about the feel of a sea, the way color changes with temperature, the tone of light under different skies. The Vikings lived by those cues. A green horizon might mean shallows. A sudden grayness could mean incoming fog. Even the brightness of distant water revealed the direction of sunlight filtered through clouds. You crouch at the edge of the deck, watching sunlight refract through a thin film of asterisk foam. The colors deep in green, gold, blue, and white, all weaving together. It feels almost hypnotic. Somewhere in that shimmer lies a map, one that cannot be drawn but must be felt. You imagine the crew doing the same centuries ago, every eye trained to catch the slightest shift. There is a story of a helmsman who navigated through ice fields by studying the water's tint. He claimed that certain shades of blue revealed safe passages between flows. Researchers who studied Arctic explorers centuries asterisk later found the same technique in use. The water near ice indeed reflects different wavelengths depending on thickness and depth. That insight had survived through oral tradition long after anyone remembered where it began. You straighten up the wind, brushing your face. The sea stretches outward in endless gradients of color, each one holding a secret. The Vikings did not need to measure. They simply recognized. Perhaps that is what we have lost the patience to watch long enough for meaning to emerge. The ship moves asterisk onward, the sunlight playing across its wake. Behind you, the water brightens into silver ribbons, fading slowly back to blue. You feel a quiet gratitude for this forgotten skill, the ability to see the world not as scenery, but as information written in light. The horizon glows softly ahead, and for a moment it feels as though the sea itself is speaking, telling you where to go. The sky begins to thicken with clouds, long gray ribbons stretching across the sun. The light dims but softens, and the wind changes asterisk pitch. Every Viking sailor knew that shift intimately. To them, clouds were not decoration. They were prophets. Each shape, each movement, each color in the sky carried meaning. As you tilt your head upward now, you realize that the heavens themselves were once a second ocean, just one they learned to sail with their eyes. In the sagas there are lines describing captains who read the roof of the sky before setting sail. This was not superstition. Modern meteorologists recognize that many of their observations remain valid. A ring asterisk around the moon signaled moisture in the air, the forerunner of rain. High feathery cirrus clouds meant good weather, while low, heavy masses crawling across the horizon warned of wind. You can imagine the quiet tension as a helmsman glanced upward, his expression enough to make the crew tighten the ropes without a word. A remarkable fact noted in several Icelandic texts is that the Vikings classified clouds by movement rather than shape. Instead of naming them for what they looked like, they named them asterisk for how they behaved, whether they ran, rested, or dragged across the sun. It was a system born from constant exposure, more poetic than scientific, yet perfectly suited to seafaring life. One lesser-known practice involved studying the reflection of clouds in the sea. The Vikings noticed that certain types of clouds cast clearer, brighter reflections in calm water. The sharper the reflection, the heavier the air, which often preceded fog or rainfall. Centuries later, early meteorologists confirmed that optical density in the asterisk atmosphere does affect how clouds appear on reflective surfaces. The old sailors didn't know the physics, but they knew the signs. An intriguing story from a Greenland voyage tells of sailors predicting a storm by how quickly seabirds dropped toward the waves. They said the birds were speaking with the sky. Scientists now understand that birds sense changes in barometric pressure before humans do. The Vikings had no barometers, yet they observed the same signals. Experience was their instrument. The air around you feels asterisk thick now, the scent of rain mixing with salt. The helmsman glances upward again, squinting toward a narrow gap in the clouds. Through it, sunlight filters like pale honey. You watch his face, calm but focused, and you understand that he is reading just as you might read a book. Each wisp, Each shadow, each gleam is a sentence in a language nearly forgotten. They watched the horizon constantly because clouds near the edge of vision told more than those above. A faint haze might reveal distant land. A bank of low fog often hid drifting ice. There's a line in one saga where a sailor claims to see through the air to find Greenland. Scholars think this was not metaphor but observation of refraction, the bending of light at high latitudes that can make land appear where none exists. To those sailors, illusion and reality sometimes merged. You can see why their weather law became myth. When clouds moved fast and strange, they said Thor's goats were racing through the sky. When the sea glowed green under a pale sun, they said the gods were testing courage. Belief gave their world narrative, but beneath it lay genuine understanding. Their stories kept knowledge alive across generations who had no written manuals. Some modern researchers believe that the Vikings could forecast weather nearly as accurately as 19th century sailors purely by observation. They timed departures to coincide with the good sky, a pattern of stable, pale clouds stretching eastward. When that formation appeared, it meant 3 days of calm. It wasn't guesswork. It was statistical memory passed down in verse and rhythm. You look again at the clouds. They are moving faster now, tails fraying into mist. The light underneath turns greenish and the waves sharpen. The ship cacks as the wind picks up, but the crew seems unconcerned. They know this kind of storm, brief, noisy, more bluster than danger. The helmsman calls out softly, adjusting the sail, and the long ship pivots gracefully. The Vikings built vessels that could respond instantly, their curved hulls slicing through waves rather than fighting them. Raindrops begin to fall, tapping gently against the deck. You listen to the sound, steady and patient. Somewhere in that rhythm, you hear the same peace those sailors must have felt. To them, weather was not a threat, but a message. If you listened, you were safe. Gradually, the rain fades and sunlight breaks through again, scattering diamonds across the surface of the sea. The clouds drift apart like curtains opening after a performance. You exhale slowly, the tension easing. Above you, the sky glows with that luminous clarity that always follows a northern storm. For a brief moment, you understand what it meant to trust the sky so completely. It was not faith and luck, but partnership with nature. They lived by observation, patience, and respect tools as vital as any oar or sail. You lift your face to the wind, eyes half closed, and let the fading clouds carry their quiet wisdom across your skin. The sea has calmed again, rolling softly under a pale afternoon sky. You feel the rhythm of it through the soles of your feet, a pulse older than memory. Every wave carries a tone, every swell a personality. The Vikings gave those moods names because to survive you had to understand the sea's emotions. It was never just water to them. It was a living force with tempers, habits, and days of rest. In the sagas, the sea is described as a being that can smile or frown. Calm waters are said to purr like a cat, while stormy ones snarl and bite. Such language might sound fanciful now, but it captures something deeply practical. Recognizing these moods was not about poetry. It was about prediction. A faint shimmer on the horizon might mean playful swells, harmless and rhythmic. A green-black surface with low humps meant rising wind and danger. Each texture told a story. Mariners' journals from later centuries echo this same skill. They refer to whispering seas that precede calm weather and nervous seas that tremble before storms. Modern meteorologists note that subtle vibrations do shift in pressure changes, altering the way water behaves. So when a Viking sailor said the ocean was uneasy, he was making a precise observation in poetic form. One vivid account from an Icelandic poem describes how sailors would listen to the difference between rolling swells and breaking chop. Long, even waves meant deep water. Short, chaotic bursts meant reefs or shoss. Sometimes when waves broke oddly 1 in 3 larger than the rest, they called it a hunger sea, believing it sought a sacrifice. Behind the myth was real danger. Rogue waves, unpredictable and powerful. An unexpected anecdote survives from a 10th century voyage to the Hebrides. The crew reported that the sea hummed before it spoke. They meant that faint vibrations rose through the hull before any visible change occurred. Some scientists suggest they were hearing infrasonic frequencies produced by pressure fronts and undersea movement. Without understanding the physics, the Vikings still used this as an early warning. You crouch, placing your palm flat on the deck. The ship rocks gently, and you can feel that same vibration. It's faint but steady, a deep murmur that never stops. No wonder they treated the sea as alive. It literally sings if you're quiet enough to hear it. They also believed that each body of water had a mood distinct from others. The Norwegian fjords were sleepy, the North Sea sharp, the Greenland waters cruel. These labels came from centuries of repeated experience. When one sailor described a lazy current, everyone knew it meant slower swells, but treacherous undertow. The sea's personality became a shorthand for survival. Some of their expressions still survive in Scandinavian languages today. Words like brim rote, surfroot, and sagruna sea rumble carry echoes of those old instincts. To name something is to respect it, and naming the sea's moods gave them power over fear. There's a passage in one saga that tells of a storm where the sea turned black as ink. The crew said it ate the light. To them, that was a sign not just of danger, but of betrayal, the ocean turning against its own travelers. Yet even then, they didn't curse it. They spoke to it promising gifts when the voyage was done. Whether that was prayer or psychology, it worked. Belief steadied trembling hands. Modern oceanographers often speak of the sea as chaotic, unpredictable. But perhaps that chaos is only unreadable because we've forgotten its language. The Vikings saw pattern where we see noise. They could tell when a storm would pass and when it would linger. They could sense when the sea would rest again. Their skill wasn't magic. It was attention refined into instinct. You gaze out at the horizon now. The water shimmers like molten silver, calm but alert. It reminds you of a giant animal breathing in its sleep. The ship rocks gently, the air thick with salt. Every creak of timber and sigh of rope seems part of the same living rhythm. When sailors returned home after long voyages, they often said that the land felt strange beneath their feet, as if it were the sea frozen in place. Their bodies missed the movement. They had learned to match their balance to the waves so completely that stillness made them dizzy. You sense little of that yourself now, standing on this gently rocking deck, feeling the sea's slow heart beating beneath you. The Vikings might have described this calm as the sea's smile. They knew it wouldn't last, but for now it was mercy. They would rest, eat, sing softly, and thank the water for its gentleness. The sea, unpredictable as ever, listened. You close your eyes and let that pulse move through you. The soft lift, the slow drop, the eternal breathing of the ocean. It's easy to imagine how sailors Asterisk once spoke to it like a friend, half in fear, half in love. Maybe that's the truest thing they ever knew, that the sea's moods mirror our own, shifting from calm to fury, to forgiveness and back again. Night drifts in slowly, carrying a cool wind that smells of salt and rain. The stars begin to fade behind gathering clouds, and the sea darkens into polished glass. The crew grows quieter, moving with practiced ease as the wind changes. Somewhere forward, a man murmurs what sounds like a prayer. Asterisk, another tosses a small coin into the water. You realize you're watching the boundary between science and superstition, though in the Viking world those two things were never separate. They lived in a time when observation and belief shared the same bed. To them, understanding the world meant listening both to what the senses revealed and to what the unseen might whisper. A sailor could measure a shadow, study a current, and still ask the gods for guidance in the same breath. No contradiction existed between faith and logic. Each asterisk strengthened the other. Archaeologists have uncovered small amulets aboard Viking ships, carved bits of wood, smooth stones, and bones wrapped in cloth. These were charms for safe passage, carried not as decoration, but as part of the ship's working equipment. They were often placed near the mast, where wind and fate met. In one burial site, a fragment of birch bark was found inscribed with runes that translate roughly to, "May the sea see me kindly." That single sentence holds their world asterisk view and miniature knowledge paired with reverence. A curious custom mentioned in early Norse writings describes sailors scratching runes into the hull before launching. The marks represented wind, luck, or calm seas. It is difficult to know whether they believed these signs physically affected the ocean or whether they were simply ways to focus intention. Some researchers think the carvings worked as psychological anchors, helping the crew face fear with a sense of control. Others insist the rituals were genuine attempts at asterisk communication with divine forces. The truth likely sits somewhere between both. One legend tells of a helmsman who refused to sail without a small pouch of earth from his homeland tied to the stern. He said it reminded the ship where to return. Historians debate whether such stories are literal or symbolic, but the sentiment feels deeply human, the longing for connection in a world of uncertainty. Even the shape of their ships reflected a blend of faith and practicality. The curved prows carved with dragons or asterisk serpents were not mere ornament. They were meant to frighten spirits of storm and mist, invisible entities thought to dwell in certain seas. Yet when approaching friendly harbors, the crew often covered the carvings with cloth to avoid scaring local land spirits. It was etiquette for the unseen world. To modern eyes, this might look quaint, but to the Vikings, balance between respect and reason was essential. You glance around the deck as the wind stiffens. The men tighten ropes and check the sail's edge. Their movements are asterisk deliberate, almost ritualistic. It is difficult to tell where work ends and ceremony begins. They whistle to the wind, not as jest, but as invitation. That sound, sharp and bright, is said to please Nord, the god of seafarers. The superstition that whistling can summon wind still lingers among sailors today. In one saga, a captain hesitates before leaving harbor because the waves growl without mouths. The crew waits until dawn when the sea quiets, believing that the water spirits have been appeased. Asterisk, from a modern viewpoint, it could simply mean the tide changed, the wind calmed, and the danger passed. Yet, that willingness to treat nature as conscious may have helped them survive. If you believe the sea listens, you pay attention to every sound it makes. The rain begins, light at first, pattering softly across the deck. You notice how no one curses or complains. Instead, they speak softly to the sky, their words half chant, half comfort. This is what made their world so different from ours. They did not separate knowledge asterisk from reverence. To know something deeply was to respect it. There are still puzzles historians argue about. Some claim that the Vikings' understanding of weather patterns was purely empirical, built on observation. Others argue that ritual and myth played an equal role in decision-making. Perhaps they are both right. In a world without instruments, intuition and imagination had to share the same space. The Vikings had no need to name one science and the other faith. There were simply two ways of keeping asterisk alive. As the night deepens, thunder murmurs far away, low and patient. Lightning flickers on the horizon, lighting up the clouds from within. The crew moves slower now, conserving energy, trusting the rhythm they know so well. The storm is not punishment or surprise. It is part of the pattern, and somewhere in that acceptance lies the heart of their wisdom. You stand still, the rain cooling your face, the ship rocking beneath your feet. The sea glows faintly each time lightning flashes, revealing a silver path across the asterisk water. It feels almost sacred, as though something vast and kind watches from beyond the storm. Perhaps that is what the Vikings understood most profoundly, that ore itself was a kind of knowledge, a bridge between mystery and truth. The sea quiets after the storm, breathing in long, gentle sighs. Mist clings to the water like smoke, soft and silver in the dawn. The air tastes clean again, sharp with salt and faintly sweet from seaweed. You hear a sound beneath the surface, a deep rush like wind trapped asterisk underwater. The crew leans over the side, peering into the dim green world below. Then you see it, a shadow the size of the ship itself, sliding beneath the waves, a whale. To Viking sailors, whales were not just animals. They were companions, omens, even guides. The Norse word for whale, halva, carried connotations of wisdom and age. Stories told of whales leading ships toward safe harbors or away from hidden reefs. Others warned of the huff gopher, a creature so vast that sailors mistook it for an island until it sank beneath asterisk them. Some believe that when whales surfaced near calm waters, the voyage was blessed. When they disappeared for days, trouble followed. Archaeological evidence supports how deeply these creatures influenced Norse life. Carved whale bones were found in coastal settlements, shaped into ornaments and tools. Whale oil was prized for lamps that burned brighter than any other fuel. But the relationship went far beyond utility. The Vikings saw in whales something divine creatures who crossed worlds, swimming between the known and the unknowable. A rare detail recorded by a later Icelandic historian describes how sailors used the songs of whales to navigate. He wrote that experienced men could hear the hum of life beneath and tell whether the animals swam in deep or shallow water. Modern research shows that whale calls do change with depth and temperature, echoing differently through various layers of the ocean. It is entirely possible that those ancient mariners noticed the same. Another curious fragment of law tells of an asterisk voyage to Greenland, where the crew followed a pod of whales for days, trusting their path to lead them through fog. When land appeared, they offered part of their catch back to the sea in gratitude. Whether that story is true or not, it captures the spirit of the time. The belief that listening to life, not just to the elements, could reveal direction. Some scholars still wonder whether such stories were metaphorical or literal. Perhaps the Vikings followed whales because they hunted near nutrient-rich currents that also favored navigation. Perhaps it was instinct shaped by generations of observation. Whatever the case, their respect for those creatures endured. To kill a whale without reason was considered bad luck. Even warriors, fierce in every other respect, hesitated before striking something so immense and intelligent. You imagine the sound now, the low, haunting call that travels farther than any human voice. It vibrates through the ship's hull and settles in your bones. The men listen in silence, their faces calm, their eyes reflecting faint moonlight. In this moment, no one doubts that the ocean is alive. The song fades, but the peace it leaves behind lingers. There is a tale of a chieftain who claimed a white whale had saved his ship from destruction. When a storm rose suddenly, the creature surfaced beside them, breaking the waves and calming the water. Whether myth or coincidence, the story passed into legend. Modern scientists have documented cases where whales disrupt surface waves simply by moving near them. Perhaps this man's miracle was just the physics of motion, but that doesn't make it less wondrous. Later, you hear laughter as the crew shares fragments of old sea songs. Many of them mention whales, comparing them to gods or mountains that breathe. Some verses describe whales carrying souls to the afterlife, swimming through stars instead of water. The image stays with you, the idea that every voyage might have a guardian below, unseen, yet present. You lean on the rail again, peering into the glowing blue beneath the surface. It feels endless, full of life. A single ripple crosses the calm, spreading outward until it vanishes into distance. Perhaps that's how wisdom travels too. One motion in deep water, unseen but everlasting. The Vikings might not have called it science, but they understood connection. They saw themselves as part of a world where animals, humans, and gods all moved within the same pattern. Every whale's breath, every wave's rise, every gust of wind belonged to the same great rhythm. You stand quietly now, listening for another sound from below. There's none, but the silence feels full, like the pause between heartbeats. For a moment you sense what they must have felt, small yet not insignificant, surrounded yet never alone. The ship cacks softly. The ocean rests, and somewhere far below, the deep world hums with stories still untold. The morning fog lingers like smoke, and the sea stretches into gray infinity. The horizon seems to waver, neither near nor far, as though the world itself is breathing in and out. The crew moves asterisk cautiously, their eyes narrowed against the haze. To them, this is not merely poor weather. It is a test. The Vikings knew that the ocean could play tricks on the senses, twisting sight and distance into illusions. Every sailor has faced it. That strange moment when the line between water and sky disappears. The Vikings called such times the sea's deceit. They spoke of false horizons, of lights that danced where no land existed, of ghost ships that vanished when approached. Some of these were stories told to keep apprentices alert asterisk, but others came from hard experience. Today, science calls these effects refraction and mirage. Back then, they were signs that the ocean was toying with perception. One documented phenomenon from northern waters still bears their mark, the hilling, a shimmering reflection of distant objects caused by layers of cold and warm air. Sailors might see mountains floating above the horizon, or islands hovering upside down in the sky.